My goodness. Welcome, friends. I'm really excited about today's episode. As you know, I've kind of been obsessed with omega 3s and omega 6s lately, and I have curated a professional for us to really discuss all of it. So, on this episode, we've got Stuart Tomc. He's the former global educator and brand ambassador for Nordic Naturals. He was vice president of human nutrition for CV Sciences. He's the maker of Plus CBD and the vice president of North American Herb and Spice, the maker of Oreganol P73. And Stuart has over 30 years of experience in the dietary supplement industry. He's helped sell $1 billion in supplements and has appeared in over 6,000 radio, TV, and podcast interviews. Today, we get to be one of those. I'm so excited. So grab your favorite beverage, hang in here because you're going to learn a lot today.
Welcome to the Business of Inner Peace. I'm your host, Erin Jean, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's pretend we're sitting in my living room enjoying a cup of coffee or tea and getting to know each other just a little better. That's what I love. I love getting to hear your story. I love feeling connected by the spirit of understanding that our stories bring. Today, I'm sharing some of my story, but I hope someday soon you'll be telling me yours. Listen, I know that you're feeling overwhelmed with life, and nothing is exactly how you'd like it to be. Your marriage is not what you hoped for. Motherhood is harder than you imagined, and you've lost yourself somewhere in the mix of responsibilities. Well, if you're ready to bring some more peace and joy into your life, reconnect with God who made you, and start living a life you love, then grab your cup of coffee or tea and let's dive into today's show.
Yay, Stuart. Good morning. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Erin. It's such an honor to be with you today.
Yay. I feel honored as well. So we just have to dive right in because I have like 2 pages of questions for you. I know that you've spent decades in the supplement industry and you have obtained, as I've heard, the nickname the Omega Guy. Is that right?
Oh, it's a cute tongue-in-cheek story, Erin. They call me affectionately the Omega Man. My friends that are academics and scientists have said to me at many different conferences, wow, Stuart, I mean, do you have a hobby? Do you have another hobby other than omega-6, omega-3 balance and fatty acids? And it's actually, my greatest joy. And so they affectionately call me the Omega Man, but I have to give credit always, Erin, to all of the luminaries, the academics, the scientists, the doctors, and the professors that have mentored me over my career. So I give all of the credit to them.
Absolutely. I love that. I think it's really just cool that this is kind of like your passion and hobby. And I have a love of learning about holistic health myself. I've never done any formal education, but as my years of being a mom, I've just kind of gobbled this stuff up because I'm wanting to do better for myself and my family. So let's just dive into the topic of omega 3s and omega 6s. For somebody out there that's listening that doesn't really know anything, I was just hoping we could like cover the basics first. So, what are the differences between omega 3 and omega 6 fatty acids?
Okay. Both omega-3 and omega-6 are called essential fatty acids, which simply means our bodies don't make them. We have to get them from our diet, from the food that we eat, or from supplements. Omega-3s are largely anti-inflammatory, while omega-6s are largely pro-inflammatory. And so that's really the simple refrain that everybody needs, I think, to get comfortable with. My number one mentor in the area, William E. Lands, and we'll talk a little bit about his work as we go on, he used to always say, omega-6, which is getting a really bad rap right now. Have you seen, Erin? everybody's trying to beat up on the seed oils and
Oh yeah, yeah,
right,
for
and they're demonizing the omega sixes, and they're kind of, holding up the omega threes as if they're saints. And Professor Lanz used to always say omega 6 is only toxic to the degree that it exceeds omega 3 in the tissue. And
sure.
his prized student, Captain Joe Hibbelin, who's one of the titans in the space, he then coined the term, the tissue is the issue. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the main thing I want people to take away today from what I have learned and what I wanted to share with your audience. Imagine my left fist is omega 6. It's essential. The body doesn't make it. It's pro-inflammatory. My right fist is omega 3. The body doesn't make it. It's anti-inflammatory. And what we need is to have them both in balance, where most people are so far out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've learned recently, and this is a big reveal, simply lowering the omega 6s in the diet, like turning away from soybean oil, safflower, sunflower, cottonseed oil. That's the short chain omega 6s. And then the longer chain omega 6s come from animal flesh, in eggs, in red meat. Uh, Simply lowering the omega 6s by themselves, that won't increase the omega 3s in a meaningful way at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of people are kind of missing the boat by saying omega 6s are pro-inflammatory, therefore they're bad. Omega 3s are anti-inflammatory, therefore they're good. Ultimately, we need a balance between the two for a healthy inflammatory response. And so that's why I want people to realize just eliminating the seed oils isn't going to do it. We actually are so deficient in oily fish in our culture. And even in cultures where they do eat enough oily fish, there are omega 6s that come from seeds and nuts. It's not all bad. Think of this for a moment, Aaron. One of my teachers, Michael Crawford, Professor Michael Crawford, for those of you taking notes, he wrote a book called The Driving Force, Sir Michael Crawford. He's considered Grandpa DHA. Because of his seminal work, they ended up putting omega 3 into infant baby formula. Okay. He always said, and this was beautiful, imagine that seeds are where the universe put the omega 6s, and the green leafy vegetables and the algae, that's where the omega 3s are. So just ask yourself, even before you test yourself, how many seeds are you eating, grains, seed oils, and animals that eat the grains relative to green leafy vegetables, fish, or algae that, or fish that eat the algae that are basically green? So do you see why that's a nice place for us to start? Seeds are where the omega 6s come from. The omega 3s are where the greens come from. The omega 3s come from the greens.
Yeah. So it sounds like this is kind of the yin and yang of the fatty acids. Like they're really important to be in balance, if I'm hearing you correct. And ideally, in an idyllic world, we could just eat a balanced diet of that. Right?
Ideally, however, at this point, we've now tested quite a few people around the world
Mhm.
between the laboratory that we're currently working with right now, and then other omega-3 blood spot testing laboratories. We've tested a lot of people, not as many as we will, but millions of people around the world. And what we're finding is it's almost impossible at this point to eat your way into balance even with the most dedicated diet. I love the people. I'm a recovered person like that, that thought that I could do it all from food. But the reality is that we probably really do need supplementation at this point to maintain the healthy balance that our bodies need.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about what it might look like in the body if we are really high and out of balance? Like if we have really high in omega 6s, especially I really would love to know if you have any input about children with that because that's where a lot of my listeners have kiddos.
Well, it's a very, very powerful question because if you'd indulge me for a moment, I just want to grab my professor's book here, Aaron. I know that this was a little bit
Yeah, no.
I didn't plan on reading this part live, but I think it's just very, very, very important for your question. Okay. So
Okay.
this book is called Fish. We can maybe put that up on the screen.
Uh,
Fish, Omega-3 and Human Health, second edition by William E. Lands.
okay. I'll
So
put a
here's what
link to it as well.
it would be great. You can get it. It's expensive book. It's out of print, but for those that are very, very dedicated that want to know the subject, I think this is the seminal tone. So
Okay.
he says, overall, omega-3 fatty acids can be recommended to a general healthy population to prevent development of atherosclerosis, thrombosis, arrhythmia, and also to reduce the risk of increased autoimmune conditions. The important aspect, as emphasized in Chapter 5, is to begin effective balancing of dietary essential fatty acids early enough to prevent amplified actions before cellular changes and tissue damage occur in an irreversible way. That's what our job is here, is
Yeah.
primary prevention. And our goal is to become the biggest preventative health company in the world. And that's where I want us to really focus. So what happens, what we're seeing when people are out of balance, that it affects you globally. It affects you on a cellular level, and we're only as healthy as our cells. You see what happens when we have too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s. By default, we almost always have more saturated fats in our cell membranes and cholesterol crystals. And the cell membrane becomes thick and sticky and rigid. Just kind of imagine that.
Mhm.
Saturated fats are like broomsticks. The unsaturated omega-3s are more like slinkies. And you need a balance there to have the right fluidity in the cell membrane. So in the absence of the right balance of fatty acids, it impedes brain cell to brain cell communication. That's huge. There's all kinds of evidence now that there's a link between gestational diabetes and autism. This just hit a couple of days ago, and I'll send you the
I've never
paper
heard that.
so that you can drop this in. This just hit, and attention deficit disorder and all kinds of neurological conditions are coming from gestational diabetes. And this is a study that looked at 56 million mother and children pairs. This is incredible because we've been looking for this link. Why are we seeing these increased rates of these behavior issues of attention deficit disorder and autism? And of course, we've been blaming all kinds of things. And
Yeah.
if you think of the milieu, if you have 37 trillion cells and your cells lack the optimal fluidity, it's going to slow down brain cell to brain cell communication. Nutrients will not get into the cells as easily, and then waste products will not be able to get out of the cells easily. So what we're doing by lowering the omega-6 that's relatively pro-inflammatory, increasing the omega-3 that's anti-inflammatory, is we're restoring the structure and the function of every one of our cells. Red blood cells are born every day and they die. Let's use an analogy with children. I'm also a parent.
Yeah.
What happens when our red blood cells, there's my pet red blood cell,
I love this. There's props.
always. So imagine the cute little red blood cell being born into a hostile environment of too many pro-inflammatory omega-6s relatively to the anti-inflammatory omega-3s. Imagine that as a child coming home to a home that isn't safe. There's not enough food, it's cold, it's dirty, and the parents or the caregivers are absent or fighting. How do those children turn out? We all know the answer to that. What happens when a child is born into a loving environment where there's adequate shelter and guidance and care, whether from the immediate biological parents or from caregivers? We know how that child turns out. So I hope that that answers the question, because often what people want to do with dietary supplements, Aaron, is they want to sort of play a natural version of reductionist thinking, where they want to sort of prescribe and recommend omega-3s the way that we prescribe and recommend drugs. And they're completely different. What makes it so fascinating is there are currently 3 FDA-approved omega-3 fish oil drugs. two in America and one in Japan. Are you aware of that?
No, I didn't even know the FDA had anything to do with omegas.
Oh yeah. So for many, many, many years, they had omega-3 EPA and DHA that we've heard of before, most of us, and
Yeah.
that was to lower something called triglycerides. You've probably seen that on your blood test, right?
Yeah.
It's another lipid measurement of fats that are floating around. So it's HDL, LDL, and then triglycerides. So EPA and DHA omega-3 is an FDA-approved drug to lower high triglyceride levels. And then in 2018, a huge study came out called Reduce It in the New England Journal of Medicine. And they gave more omega-3 than they have normally given in trials. And they gave it for a long period of time to really increase the tissue levels. And that was a remarkable study because it showed on top of the standard of care that omega-3 was able to reduce major adverse coronary events 25%
Wow.
on top of statins. So
Wow.
I regret always a long answer for a simple question, but I hope you can see where I'm going here, right? Our
Yeah.
job is prevention.
Well, I think that's really powerful. So I had asked a few close friends if they had questions for you, and one of the questions was actually, does the high omega-3s affect cholesterol? Because coincidentally, she actually tested fantastic in her ratio, but just recently her cholesterol has shot up. I'm guessing that it has more to do with menopause than anything else, but we had to ask this question to you if there was a correlation of your cholesterol shooting up because of high omega-3s.
Well, what happens is omega-3 can help lower your triglycerides. A triglyceride is three fatty acids with a glycerol backbone, looks like a letter E. And one of those is often it is an LDL
Yeah,
cholesterol.
that's what I was
So
going to
what
ask.
happens is it's very well known and appreciated that when you lower elevated triglycerides, you might see a concomitant increase in LDL. Um, and that isn't necessarily bad, although a lot of people now are kind of, obsessed with the idea that LDL is the target.
Yeah,
And we're living through a paradigm change right now in lipidology and in the omega-3 conversation. And so I've learned this from one of my mentors. I'll share it with you and see what you think. One of my teachers said, well, let's just riddle this for a moment. If the theory was that saturated fat increases your LDL cholesterol, and LDL cholesterol is the rate limiting factor for heart disease, and then we told everyone to stop using as many saturated fats, and we told them to use these unsaturated fats, right? Here are these seed oils, these polyunsaturated fats. And then statins are the number one selling drug in the history of the world, and they are. And people's cholesterol now en masse is lower than it has been, and they would drive it down further if they could. Why is it that coronary vascular disease is still the number one killer? It's a
yeah,
great question.
it's a great question. Well, and my sister's a nurse, and it's so interesting. We're totally sidetracking a little bit here, but she recently read a study about the longevity of life for people on statins. And do you know that these doctors found out on average, a statin extended your life by 4 days?
Yes, I've seen that research.
I was
And
like, what the heck?
yeah,
That is,
and one of our team members today, Dr. Michael Lewis, who's remarkable. He wrote the book When Brains Collide. He's one of my great friends and mentors. Sent me an article today, and I haven't even have not yet had a chance to totally dissect it, but really pointing out, some of these unintended consequences of focusing just a little bit too much on LDL cholesterol. I can go back to Dr. Lanz in the book I was just reading from. He used to say that cholesterol is simply a measurement that you're taking in more energy than you're currently burning. And
mm,
so there's that mismatch of energy in, right?
yeah,
Energy out. We're all kind of sitting around. We don't move around as much as we do. And as a result, as our caloric intake remains the same and we're more sedentary, that can raise cholesterol. And then, of course, the thyroid can never be missed in this conversation because it's really the master metabolic center to help, keep It's like the thermostat, if you will. So if you have a low, sluggish thyroid, which a lot of us do as we age,
Hmm.
then that can also contribute to an increase in LDL. I'm hopeful that based on the latest research, that medical science in general will start to accept the role of omega-3 and omega-6 balancing in primary prevention. Because going back to what Dr. Land said before, and
Hmm.
it's the only time in the book that he writes in all caps. And here's a man I've never seen swear and he never yells. He's making a point before. So going back to the children
Yes.
and going back to gestational diabetes and the observations that were made from Professor Robert Gibson from Adelaide in Australia, who said there's nothing else for neurodevelopment other than DHA. Nothing. So if mom is deficient in enough omega-3, she finds a way to produce enough of it for the firstborn. It's brilliant. The way the body works is amazing. There's enzymatic machinery that convert your green leafy vegetables into DHA, and then mom actually has more DHA in her body than dad does, usually in the hips.
Hmm.
And the mom can mobilize that DHA to build this new brain and eyes and central nervous system. What happens after the pregnancy? And we've all heard it, postpartum depression,
Hmm.
mommy brain. We've heard this for years and years. And then you have a second child, and then a third child, and maybe even a fourth child, and you are deficient in omega-3s, you don't have a good omega-6-3 balance, your omega-3 index is too low, that has been correlated to not only postpartum depression, major depression, homicide mortality, and suicide mortality rates.
Wow.
So now that we add this gestational diabetes to maybe being the missing link to things like autism and attention deficit disorder, I hope that everyone can see how critical it is then to make sure that mom and dad have a healthy balance between omega-6 and omega-3 in their tissues as they're getting ready to bring a child into this world, and that they also have a healthy ratio of the bacteria in their gut, which we can get into on another episode, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
balance between the negative and positive bacteria in the gut, because those are interconnected and they all create the healthiest environment for our children.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue because the next question I wanted to ask you was, how does this ratio affect emotional and spiritual struggles that so many women face, like depression, anxiety, or feeling stuck? Is there, because I know our brain, right, is really needing fatty acids. Is there a connection kind of on mental health, brain health?
Oh, there is. Yes, there is. And really, one of the seminal papers ever published on this, the lead author is Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis, who wrote the book When Brains Collide. And in 2011, he and a colleague of his, was a famous psychiatrist from the National Institutes of Health, from the Division of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, they published a paper in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry in 2011 looking at military suicide.
Wow.
And that's a heavy subject, and I'll show you how that ties into mental well-being. Um, but what they did was they were sitting there. It's a powerful story. One day they were having a beer, as they told me, and the psychiatrist had said to the colonel, I wish we could have tested these soldiers before they committed suicide. And Colonel Lewis said it, you should have asked sooner. The Army actually has a repository of blood. And this is since Gulf War syndrome, right? They wanted to track the blood, so they were keeping blood of everyone that had enlisted. So they went and they grabbed 800 samples from different years. I'm going from memory, I believe it was 100 samples from every year for 8 different years, matched 800 controls rather, based on rank and sex. And they had some pretty stunning findings. Soldiers that had seen another soldier killed in front of them had approximately, I'm going from memory here, about a 50% chance of suicide. Soldiers that had a documented mental health history had a slightly higher risk of suicide. But those that had the lowest omega-3, they had about, on average, about a 25-to-1 ratio omega-6 to omega-3, kind of the average we see here in America, had a 62% greater increased risk of committing suicide. And I
Wow.
remember asking both of these distinguished public health officials, that's a heavy subject. Why suicide? And they pointed out to me that that's really the end of depression.
Mm,
That's the end of anxiety. So when we can actually show studies where we've gone to prisons, and this is well documented, and we've given people the right micronutrients for the brain, because that's also hugely important, and the right fatty acids, that's tracked to a statistically significant reduction in recidivism in violent offenders. And there was a big meta-analysis that came out last year in the Journal of Aggressive and Violent Behavior, where it was a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. And they said that omega-3 is a safe, cheap, and effective intervention, averaging about a 30% reduction in aggression. And they said that it needs to be deployed in the criminal justice system, in community nutrition, and in our homes. So I think you're making an excellent point, right? We're all under so much stress.
hmm
And there certainly is a very powerful correlation between the omega-3 deficiency and a high omega-6, low omega-3 ratio and healthy brain function.
Yeah. Well, and if I remember correctly, doesn't Dr. Michael Lewis do a program with like soldiers that have PTSD or something, and he helps them on the with the omegas?
Yes, he does. He runs the Brain Health Education Research Institute. I've been so honored to walk alongside him and, salute him for his public health service. I'm kind of the president of the Mike Lewis fan club.
Yeah.
And yes, he has done an extraordinary job. He created the Omega Protocol for traumatic brain injury. And if you're not familiar with his work, the book is called When Brains Collide. And he has helped many, many people that are dealing with traumatic brain injury and PTSD with nutrition and helping to get them healthy enough to function.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's near and dear to my heart. I used to struggle with PTSD, and I have a brother that served in the army and two tours, one in Iran and one in Afghanistan. And essentially, we've kind of lost him to street drugs. That's kind of where he went for trying to manage what he's doing. But it just breaks my heart because it's like, oh my goodness, if we could have such a simple solution of the omegas, it might have put his life on a different trajectory. So you alluded to a few times that there is a way to test this. And I kind of want to talk about that because I've gotten myself and my family tested, but if you're like in the world of labs and testing, you might have this idea that you're going to have to go to your doctor and you're going to have to convince them to write you a thing for this particular test. And then you're going to have to find a lab and then you're just going to cross your fingers and hope that insurance pays for it. So can you tell me, is that the future? Is that what I have to do?
No, I think the future is more what one of my great mentors, her name is Dr. Amay Shani, and she came up with this. She's a naturopath. She's just a genius. And she said to me, Stuart, the future is the democratization of medicine, the
Mm,
democratization of medicine, right? And that's what these beautiful at-home blood spot tests are. This is how you determine the most important number for your health and longevity that you don't know, that you should know, that you will know. And you do not need a vein puncture. It's a simple blood spot test. So you prick your finger and you put 2 drops of blood onto the blotter and they send it out to the laboratory. Right before we started recording today, I was listening to Professor Paul Clayton. If you are not yet familiar with his work or anybody that's following your show, I think he's like the greatest living expert in nutrition today. And he was just calling it, he said, test-based nutrition is the equivalent of the Gutenberg press.
ooh, that's cool.
And when you think about the Gutenberg press and the
Yeah.
first time that, Martin Luther wrote the Bible in German,
Yes.
and then that caused a 130-year war. What's happening right now with technology and with artificial intelligence, everything being driven by biomarkers and empowering the individual to take responsibility for their own test, for their own health. I've had the people in the company that have said to me one time, the founder, he held up his phone and he said, hey, Stuart, in the future, you're going to have an AI generated physician's assistant.
Mm.
And she's going to tell you that your omega-6-3 ratio is out of balance. You need to eat more pickled herring, eat more sardines, eat more mackerel, test, or take an oil or a supplement that mimics fish, something that's like oily fish in liquid form. And that's where most of the commercial options that are out there leave people wanting. You read my bio earlier. I was very lucky to be at the biggest omega-3 brand, in America, at least in the world, America, maybe in the world. And
Yeah.
so we were really, really focused on just the EPA and DHA. But that's not fish.
Mm.
Those are two of the fatty acids. See, there's been a huge disconnect in the medical literature between eating oily fish and fish oil. In
Got
fact, fish oil has been failing in a lot of the clinical trials. So what's important is that we test, we don't guess, and that we then correct this omega-3 imbalance and then test again to make sure that we're in the safe zone. I think that's the future, is test-based nutrition. I love what Dr. Shunny said, the democratization of medicine. And considering this, the Gutenberg press is what we're dealing with in terms of test-based nutrition.
Yeah. Oh man, that's really cool. It's super exciting. I definitely just think it's brilliant. I've been in the supplement world for so long myself to actually have a test to know that the supplements that you're taking are working. So can we talk about that? Because that was one of the questions that came from a friend. There's so many options out there. The supplement industry really isn't regulated. And, if I could just go to Trader Joe's, like my mom is currently doing, I was like, Mom, and buying an omega-3 supplement, or just jump on Amazon and just type in like omega-3 supplement, why is that not the best idea? Can you help me with that?
Absolutely. Well, one comment that you made, another mentor of mine, his name is Neil Levin. He's actually in charge of education at Now Foods. You've probably heard of that. It's a big dietary
Yeah.
supplement company.
Yeah.
Been around for a long time. And he testified at Congress once about the adverse events with over-the-counter drugs versus the level of adverse events with dietary supplements. And
Mm.
he said, dietary supplements are highly regulated foods. They're not poorly regulated drugs, which is kind of a little bit of a zinger. So when we say that supplements are not regulated, I think that is an overstretch because
Okay.
there are all kinds of requirements for good manufacturing. If you make claims that you're not allowed to make, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, can come in and really, you know, ruin your company. So we really have to understand that nutrition just has its place in the toolbox. What's interesting with omega-3 is it's both for primary prevention, and then as I mentioned, there's 2 FDA-approved drugs here in America based on omega-3 and 1 in Japan.
Mhm.
But the bigger point, just running out and getting commercial fish oil really misses the boat now that I have learned this recently from my next set of mentors. And one of my favorite teachers is Socrates, where he said, "What do I know?" So
Mhm.
I like not knowing. And so it
Yeah.
was pointed out to me that when you make fish oil, and this is the big reveal today, when you make fish oil, I'm sure you've heard the term molecular distillation, right, Aaron?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
That
just, it's an everyday word.
Now everybody talks about it, right? Is the fish oil molecularly distilled? You've heard that, right? At least it
I
says it
have.
on the bottom,
I
right?
have, but it just made me laugh the way you said
Right,
it.
as if it's a normal thing, right? But it
Yeah.
says right on top, it's molecularly distilled. What the heck does that mean? Well, every fatty acid has its own weight because they're different chain lengths.
Mhm.
So DHA is longer than EPA, so it's heavier. It has a different weight. And so you can distill based on molecular weight. That way you can remove PCBs, dioxins, fire retardants. We're hearing about all these microplastics that are ubiquitous, that are everywhere, that are endocrine disruptors, that are really causing havoc on our hormonal system. You need to remove mercury, which we know there's a risk of prenatal mercury exposure, getting back to the children.
Yeah.
which we didn't really see with the fish. There's a lot of debate here. The women that ate fish that were pregnant, because the fish had other cofactors that were in there, like selenium and things that can help chelate out the mercury, they got the benefit of omega-3 without the risk, where the women that were afraid to eat the fish because of the mercury, that impacts your child's IQ.
Mm.
There's research that shows as much as a 3.5 IQ difference between the women that had adequate DHA and the ones that did not. But in any case, when you remove all of these contaminants, you also strip out the necessary chaperones and cofactors. And this is something that I've recently learned. I want to thank Ola Edie from Norway and Professor Paul Clayton, who have recently taught me this over the last year. Imagine how all of omega-3 starts with algae. That's where it starts in the marine web. So you've got the algae that has the fatty acids in the middle, and on the outside, there's a beautiful little ring of polyphenols. And so those polyphenols are called fluorotannins. They protect the omega-3s. If you didn't have the antioxidant on the outside, the omega-3s would explode. And so when you strip out the antioxidants, and then read any bottle of fish oil. Have you noticed, Aaron, what kind of antioxidants they normally use in fish oil? Have you read it says vitamin E?
I'm like, is there any?
Well, they put vitamin E in there
Vitamin E. Okay.
and rosemary.
Okay.
Okay, is there vitamin E in fish
No.
or rosemary? I mean, maybe if you cook it.
I'm like, I don't think they're dining on rosemary underwater.
Well, what happens is it keeps it stable in the bottle, but it can be very, very, very unstable in the human body. And
Okay.
so what's really, really important is to realize is that when you go to rush to the store or go online and you buy a commercial omega-3 product, there's ample evidence now, and I can't believe that we're finally here, that it may be doing more harm than good.
Hmm.
It's not the same as eating oily fish. You'd
Yeah.
be a lot better off to eat 5 cans of sardines a day or to eat mackerel or kipper or herring and then test your omega-3 levels. Now, Aaron, we both know most people won't do that.
Yeah.
They're
No.
not going to do that. So what you need to look for, and this is very important, you need to look for products where they have the adequate amount of polyphenols, the ones that were removed during the molecular distillation process. And I think the ideal carrier is olive oil. Olive oil from pre-harvest olives contain super high levels of polyphenols that behave like analogs. They're land-based analogs to the marine web polyphenols that were inadvertently removed during molecular distillation. So when they combine the two of them together during the manufacturing process, so this is an oxygen-free environment, they pour the high polyphenolic-rich olive oil in with the pure distilled omega-3. The polyphenols in the olives wrap around just like the algae, and it helps to increase its stability and its bioavailability. So it increases your body's antioxidants, like glutathione, instead of depleting them. The polyphenols are also chaperones. So let's go back to our kids. I remember when my kid was going to the high school prom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sent adults with chaperones to make sure that the young people get to the dance and they get home safe.
Yeah.
That's what the polyphenols are, and that's why eating fish is different than taking fish oil. So I will beseech you, anyone listening to this, it's not as easy as we thought it was. Just run out to the big box store and get a big bottle of molecularly distilled fish oil. Remember the focus? It's got no mercury. That's great. It's
Yeah.
missing the polyphenols. So let me take you through the web here quickly. Here's
Yeah.
the algae, has the polyphenols and the omega-3, and here's a plankton. So the plankton eats the algae. It's the polyphenols that increase the omega-3 in the plankton. The polyphenols are the chaperones to make sure that the fatty acids get to the dance, which is the cell membrane. Then the small fish eats the plankton or the algae. It's the polyphenol that bioaccumulates the omega-3 into the tissue, which is the issue.
Mhm.
Then the whale eats the small fish, and the Inuit ate the whale blubber.
Mhm.
That started the entire omega-3 conversation, was the Inuit paradox. When
Yeah.
we look at that whale blubber, it had polyphenols and omega-3, EPA, and DHA. They were synergistic. They were together. They occurred together in algae, and they need to occur together in the product if you want the optimal results. I never thought I'd get to this place where I would say this. I think many commercial fish oil products, you're better off to eat cold water oily fish. Don't take those. If you can find a product that combines high polyphenolic rich olive oil with molecularly distilled fish oil, that I think is going to be the solution. And I'm calling that oily fish in liquid form or a Mediterranean diet in a bottle.
Okay. I like it. So if I'm understanding you right, the olive oil is similar molecularly to what's happening in algae in comparison to like the vitamin E and rosemary is not. Is that?
Correct. Yeah, the polyphenols in the olive oil are
Mhm.
similar to the polyphenols in algae that
Got
have
it.
been removed structurally. And when you combine them together, the polyphenols create this little thing. It's a liposome. So it protects the fatty acids. That way they're on the very much like the algae. And it dramatically increases the efficacy of the product because it helps to move the omega-3 through your guts up into all of the peripheral tissues. And
Mm.
that's why this test is so important because we're not measuring your plasma. We're measuring our red blood cells. And our red blood cells take 120 days to completely turn over. They're born and they die every day. So by the time you get your number, because that's what I say to people, well, what's your number? Right?
Yeah.
They know their HDL, they know their LDL. I don't want to know your phone number, right? Your HDL, your LDL, your triglycerides, you know your shoe size. Why don't you want to know the most important number for health and longevity that you don't know that you will know at some point? My prediction, and I've heard this from my mentors, everything I share, I've learned from somebody else. I've been told that this test, the omega-6-3 balance and the omega-3 index, will appear on the standard blood panel in the next decade.
That was my
Why wait?
question. Yeah. Yeah.
Why wait? Because if you look at the big drug trials on omega-3, the massive reduction in major adverse coronary events, and this was just published last year,
Hmm.
came from lowering omega-6 and increasing omega-3 in an adequate way to truly affect the tissues. Now let's go back to what I read at the beginning of the show. What's our job? Prevent.
Yeah.
Effective balancing of essential fatty acids before irreversible tissue damage occurs. So when I say that this is a measurement, a proxy for systemic inflammation, do you see why I'm saying it like that?
Yeah.
That's different than one of the inflammatory biomarkers that people test, right? There's a whole bunch of them. I won't rattle them all off. Some that are in your urine, some that are in your blood. But this is all the way upstream inside of all of your 37 trillion cells. If we make 300 billion cells per day, what kind of environment are those cells being born into? There's a big trendy move right now to try to increase stem cells. It's a
Hmm.
big thing. People got all these products out there. They're like, I'm increasing my stem cells. And
Yes.
I think, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I mean, I don't understand the science well enough myself, but what happens if those cells are being born into a pro-inflammatory environment? Is that ideal?
Yeah. Not really. It's
No. So I think this
balance.
test and this balance and getting this straight should be a line item of it's the most modifiable risk factor that we have. Let that sit in.
Yeah, well, what I'm really gathering is that it's one of our most important biomarkers, and we really should know it. And uh, essentially, you believe that the medical field is going to catch up. I'm guessing part of the reason that they are not at this point is they don't have a huge focus on nutrition in medical school. So I'm thinking that that's probably a part of the why. But it sounds like you agree with that statement that it would be one of the most important
Oh no,
biomarkers.
it truly is. But the only reason I was smirking a little bit was because they're all catching on.
Hmm.
Modern medicine is designed um, to help with symptom management. I mean, that's the way it is. And
Yeah,
so
not
dietary
prevention.
supplements, and it's very, very clear, dietary supplements do not treat, cure, mitigate, ameliorate diseases or disease symptoms.
Yes.
Dietary supplements are designed to supplement the diet and to keep healthy people healthy. And
Yeah.
it's never been harder to keep healthy people healthy. The World Health Organization said 6.3 billion people are deficient in omega 3s. So here's the big reason why it's not yet accepted orthodoxy, and it will be. Because this test and this omega 3 index and the omega 6/3 ratio is about 20 years old.
Mm.
That's about how long it takes for an idea to start to make sense. And as I said, there are two FDA approved fish oil drugs in America and one in Japan. So
Yeah.
we've already crossed the precipice where we've gone from grandma's cod liver oil,
Yeah.
because we used to give cod liver oil before we even knew what omega 3 was for colds and flus. This
Yeah.
was a folk medicine. And we thought it was the vitamin A and the vitamin D like David. And then back in the 1850s, they had the cod liver oil wars. They didn't know what omega 3 or EPA or DHA was yet. So they would add vitamin A and add vitamin D to their products. And then they'd say, the Scottish cod liver oil is better than the British cod liver oil. They were all arguing with it. So we've really gone from folklore to big time medicine. And I'm so excited that test-based nutrition is going to replace celebrity influence.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I was saying about when your robot, and we all have them, Chat GPT or whatever you're using, it's
Yeah.
going to be your personal individual biomarker. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to hear anymore, hey, this is what I'm taking and take a look at me. That is meaningless information.
Hmm.
I mean, it's been a confidence game, and I'm so glad that it's going to end. Because can you imagine how many people are going to be looking for work when they can no longer bamboozle their audience into saying, well, I've tried them all, and this is the one that works the best. Which omega 3 product is the best? The one that gets you 9 on your omega 3 index and a 3-to-1, 2-to-1, or 1-to-1. That's the balance of omega 6 to omega 3. We need both of those indices, the omega 6/3 balance and the omega 3 index. Whatever you can do to get to a low omega 6, high omega 3 ratio and an adequate omega 3 index. The index is the percentage of EPA and DHA in the red blood cell. And this is some brand new stuff. We've learned that when you're deficient, let's go back to my little pet red blood cell, when you're deficient, meaning you're below about 5%, 5% EPA and DHA, your little red blood cell can't become half of its size to go into the microcapillary. This is incredible. This is yet another mechanism of action above and beyond the anti-inflammatory mechanism of action. So that's a big deal, right? Carrying oxygen more effectively through the body, carrying nitric oxide more effectively through the whole body. We've also learned over the last 20 years that omega 3s make these very powerful compounds that resolve inflammation. Have you heard this yet, Aaron? Have you heard this?
I haven't heard that.
Okay,
So,
so little technical jam just for a minute for the nerds here.
okay.
They're called specialized pro-resolution lipid mediators, SPMs.
Okay.
So let's put this together. Omega 6 turns on the immune system. You get a cut,
Hmm.
you need omega 6 to thicken your blood so that you don't bleed too much.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, very good. Okay, and it increases sensitivity to pain that tells you, ouch. This is good.
Yeah.
Omega 3s go through the same enzymes and they actually thin the blood. This is good after you have been clotting the blood.
Hmm.
And then they create a compound that reduces the sensitivity to pain. That's good. But then the omega 3s largely, because there's one from omega 6, but largely the omega 3s make these things called SPMs. and they orchestrate the resolution of inflammation.
Mm.
This is good. Now
Yeah,
let's go back to what Dr. Land said, because we have to read it one more time, Aaron. I
let's
think
read
it's
it.
perfect timing. Omega-3 fatty acids can be recommended to a general healthy population to prevent development of atherosclerosis, thrombosis, and arrhythmia, and also reduce the risk of increased autoimmune conditions. The important aspect, as emphasized in Chapter 5, is to begin effective balancing of dietary essential fatty acids early enough to prevent amplified actions before cellular changes and tissue damage occur in an irreversible way. You know what irreversible means?
Can't be changed.
Irreversible.
Yeah. Like it can't be reversed.
So that's why I always beg people, please, let's focus on primary prevention and keeping healthy people healthy and optimizing your cellular fluidity. Let's make sure to increase, don't you want increased brain cell to brain cell communication? Who doesn't?
Yeah.
We've all heard that term neuroplasticity,
Hmm.
right? Going back to the spiritual health and the emotional health, what
Yeah.
fires wires.
Hmm.
Okay, if you want to unlearn something to learn something new, and you don't have the right fatty acids in the brain and the right micronutrients, you might be deficient the substrate necessary for new brain cell to brain cell connections, synaptogenesis. And there's an incredible researcher. Her name is Hee-Young Kim, Dr. Kim. And she showed us this work where they deprived animals. Let's go back to our children. They deprived the animals of adequate levels of omega-3 DHA, and they showed that the brains, the neurites that make these connections, there were a
Mm.
fraction of them versus the animals that had adequate amount. And again, the children that their mothers had adequate amount of omega-3 in their bodies that made its way through breast milk. There were studies that they did with infant formula where they gave twice as much omega-3 DHA as you actually find in depleted breast milk, and saw, again, a statistically significant increase in IQ. Add to that the latest finding that gestational diabetes may be the rate limiting factor we've been trying to figure out about autism and attention deficit disorder. What's the connection between omega-3 deficiency and gestational diabetes?
Yeah, that was my next question.
That's a huge connection, because if you want to increase insulin sensitivity,
Hmm.
you need to push the saturated fats and the cholesterol crystals out of the way and return the optimal structure and function to the cell membrane. So
Hmm.
anybody can go to pubmed.gov. See, we all have ChatGPT now. See why
Yeah.
this is the end of celebrity influence? We're all
Yeah.
going to become reference machines, right? To all fact check each other. Go to pubmed.gov and look at omega-3 and gestational diabetes. Look at the research on eating fish and gestational diabetes. So I hope everybody can see just how foundational this is. I hope that we can get away from, hey, my friend has XYZ disease. How will the omega-6-3 balance help them?
Hmm.
The takeaway is, if you can make every cell as healthy as you can make it, going back to Dr. Land's, before
Before, yeah.
tissue damage occurs in an irreversible way, we can maybe avoid the folly and the hubris of brilliant intellectuals that chose to try natural things instead of standard of care. I often think of Steve Jobs, one of the smartest people in the entire world,
Hmm.
right? Pancreatic cancer, was using homeopathy and drinking carrot juice. There's nothing wrong with that. But he said that's going to be better than standard of care. And the rumor is later he regretted that, right? And wished that he could embrace. So I think the future with nutrition and medicine is it's not going to be either or, it's going to be and.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Well, and I think why this is so important to me is I've come to understand that our children that are being tested are showing up 2 to 3 times more inflamed or out of balance than the adults. And I think the problem is we tend to just look at our kids or even ourselves and say, well, they look fine. They're acting normal. I feel fine. Like I don't have any complaints. But you're sort of missing the boat on what you're talking about here is the before piece, because we know that inflammation, it's the root of every single disease that's out there. So don't you want to, it makes sense to me as a mom that I want to know where all of my kids are at so that I can feel confident that what we're doing at home is actually working to keep inflammation out of their body. Do you think that that's like smart thinking, or what's your
I think
input?
it's brilliant. I think the only caveat is to have a healthy inflammatory response. Because we
Okay.
need a healthy inflammatory response where the response turns on, it turns down, and then it turns off. And
Mm,
that's what we really need with our children. And I think it's so important. One little caveat to what you said, when they're very, very small, like infants and toddlers,
yeah.
they're going to have more arachidonic acid, omega-6, just little technical side thing here, because the brain is made up of all of these fatty acids. It's a supercomputer made out of fat. And so the major omega-6 in there is called arachidonic acid, and the major omega-3 up there is called DHA. The number one fat in the brain is oleic acid. Your body makes that. So olive oil is good, but you're taking olive oil for the polyphenols
Hmm.
because your body makes oleic acid. Okay. So
Okay.
I wouldn't, when people are looking at, why little small children and toddlers have, higher levels of arachidonic acid because the brain is still accreting it, right, to
Okay.
develop. But by the time they get, to be in school and, they're teenagers and we test those young people, yes, it's an early thing. If they can modify that risk, there was a study that came out the other day. I don't know if you caught it floating around, right? That the food choices we make in our 40s echoes into our 70s. Well, why wouldn't it? Well, why wouldn't the food choices that mom makes and dad makes? Because that's one thing I have to say that every time I hear that, right? It's mom, it's mama. Dad is part of the equation too, right?
Yeah.
If dad's an inflammatory soup,
Mhm.
right? That's not going to be ideal for our children either.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that in native cultures, they would actually put people of childbearing age on a special diet, both the father and the mother,
Yes.
to ensure. All right, Stuart. Well, this has been fun. We've learned so much. I want to be respectful of your time. Otherwise, I think we could just continue to talk about it all day. I'm sure the moms and dads out there are wanting to get themselves tested and get their families tested. So I'm going to put a link below to the test that you can just do at home. That's that blood spot test that we talked about. And you can connect with me. I'll be happy to help get you tested. Be happy to recommend an amazing oily fish
In liquid form.
in liquid form or a Mediterranean diet in a bottle that my family has been using, and Stuart uses it as well. And just thank you so much for your time today. I'm praying that God blesses you greatly for just sharing this with others. And I look forward to connecting with you again.
Oh, Aaron, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be on your show.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're feeling blessed by the content here, the number one way you can show me is by leaving me a written review of the show. I'd be forever grateful. Knowing that you're out there listening helps me know that I'm truly living out God's purpose in my life. The other thing you can do is take a screenshot of this episode, share it with a friend, or better yet, tag me on your Instagram stories. Remember, you are seen, known, and loved. May God richly bless you today. All my love, Erin Jean.